in Hebrewish.
Well, welcome, welcome. It's lovely to be able to share these moments with you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And here we go. So we had done verse 4. At least we'd done the Hebrew of it, I believe. And if, let me make sure I'm in the right place. Yes. All right. Yeah. V'chizakti et lev paro. So this is God informing Moses his strategy as to what's going to happen now. I'm going to strengthen the heart of Pharaoh.
Oh, Scar.
Sorry? V'radaf acharehem, and he will pursue them, he will chase after them. V'ikavda b'faro, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh, uvachol chelo, and through his entire army. V'yad'u Mitzrayim, and the Egyptians will understand, they will know, ki ani Hashem, that I am Hashem. Vaya'asuchein, and they did so. Referring now, referring to the Israelites. They did so. V'ikavda b'faro. This is, I think, an interesting and perhaps fundamental principle. Keshehakadosh Baruch Hu mitnakem barishaim. When the Holy One, blessed be He, avenges or takes revenge on the wicked, Shmo mitkadel umitkaved. His reputation, his name, his reputation is enlarged, becomes great, umitkaved, and becomes, well, kaved means heavy. It also, of course, so kavod, respect, has to do with sort of the thought behind respect, that is taking someone seriously. So umitkaved would mean that people take God seriously, is the way I would like to understand this. But it's so interesting, we're living at such a time now where there seems to be such a distinction between the extremes, and there's not as much of a middle as sometimes, or I think there is very often. And what it's saying is that when this happens, and the righteous see the righteousness of God and the judgments of God, they are in awe of Him. And perhaps, and in this particular case, it would even be the wicked, right? Because we're saying that the Egyptians are going to recognize God's power. V'chein hu omer, and he says similarly in Ezekiel chapter 38, v'nishpatati oto, I will make judgments against him, etc. And right after it talks about making judgments. So making judgments means people are in fact being held accountable for their behavior. And this notion of accountability is, again, an important element of a traditional belief in God. It's part of how you define the word belief in God. And that is the sense that there is not a single individual who has some degree of free will where there isn't accountability, both for good and for evil. So the point is that there is reward in one's efforts to try to live a righteous life, and likewise, there is consequences for people who do not. And we know that ultimately God is the judge, the true judge. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess judgment has to imply free will. How could you judge somebody for doing something if it was not in their ability not to do it?
Correct. Well, that's the argument, right?
Yeah.
Guilty by reason of insanity to get you off the hook. But,
well, sometimes that's I think that's not always a valid.
Of course it isn't.
Yeah.
I think that's the terrible moral consequence. I never saw the movie. I only know about it. but One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think, deals with that.
It's a book first, but yeah, it kind of just deals with what is insanity and more than it deals with whether, guilt.
Right. I mean,
But
it's
yeah.
a few different issues, large
I
issues.
think it's innocent by reason of insanity.
Thank
not
you. Yes,
guilty.
thank you.
Yeah.
It should be. That's how it should be.
That's what I mean. It is innocent by reason of insanity. Correct. Thank you.
And
But
I mean,
but we don't do it that way, though.
but there are times where that could apply.
But that's the point. Lauren, the initial point you made is there is no possibility of consequence if it's automatic. And in fact, if I can say this much, so here's the story that when an animal is involved in bestiality, the animal is killed. And the question is, why is the animal killed? It's not like the animal really had any choice in the matter. Where's the justice there? And the answer, whether or not one finds that it's a good answer or not a good answer, is the reason is that the person is executed, and also the animal. I should clarify that. And then the question is, why the animal? And the answer is because once a person is executed, they have paid for their crime. They should not continue to be held accountable for it. They have now made their payment to society, as we would put it, right? And if people see this particular animal wandering in the marketplace, or if they ever come across this animal, they're going to say, "Oh, that's the animal, blah blah. That's so and so," and that's why it's done away with. So there's just so many things to sort of think about, right? And that there's so much to all this. Anyway, the proof that, going back to our main point here, is that Rashi's giving an example of the point he made about when the Holy One, blessed be He, avenges the wicked, or shouldn't say avenge, takes revenge on the wicked. His name is magnified. He is respected all the more. So this verse in Ezekiel actually sort of says it explicitly, because it talks about God making judgment, right? And then right afterwards it says, "V'hit gadilti, v'hit gadishti." It says, "And I shall be magnified, and I shall be sanctified." This is God, okay? "V'nodati, and I shall be known," etc. Which is the very point that Rashi is making.
Well, and also with the Kaddish, Yikadal, the Yikadash, and then the next line, Shemay Rabbah. Well, that's Shemay Rabbah is similar to being known, because it's the name Rabbah being out there greatly. And, it could be a great name, but it could be great in how much it's out there and how much it's known, and the name being kind of representative of God.
Yes, you actually opened up a thought for me, and that is that, what do we say at a death? We say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. We say blessed is the true judge, and we consider death to be a judgment. And as I said, and after that, basically, the principle is that death atones for everything. There are exceptions. But in the majority of cases, one's death atones.
I understand that. I'm not sure I understand that death is a judgment. Everybody dies, and yes, everybody gets judged, but since, I mean, a baby can die,
Right.
with no
Correct.
sin, as far as I understand.
Right, of course. So, we could spend time sort of discussing that. Let me say this, we usually assume that judgment is negative, but the truth is, as I pointed out, that judgment can also be positive. In other words, a person's death, on the one hand, it atones for everything. That is because none of us, not a single human being, is perfect, right? But the truth is, a person's death actually may be a reward, right? It's at that moment when the accountability takes place. And we have many midrashim, some of which I'm sure you're familiar, which of a person, and some of these are sort of, they're trans-cultural, that at that moment, you are brought to judgment, and your life is assessed. that as long as you're continuing to live your life, you can either turn around. If you've been following a bad path, you have that ability while you're still alive to change that, or to go for bad. You can be a good person and decide at the end to go bad. So the truth is, you cannot judge a person's life until the end of it. And it's sort of implied by the two parshiot that deal with death of an individual and yet have chayim in them. So Chaye Sarah has to do with the death of Sarah, and Vayachi, which deals with the death of Jacob, also. It's at that point that you can say this person had a good life or this person didn't, or this.
Or God can say that. I don't know how well we can.
Well, we're in a better. Let's say we're in a better position. I won't push the point, but I agree with you. I mean, ultimately, that's the moment when God judges our lives. We're going to, as we talk about, we use the euphemism meeting your maker.
Yeah, but there's no way we can know everything about
No,
a person's actions, beliefs, thoughts, anything, but God can.
Of course. That's right. Absolutely. Onwards, another proof of this, okay. Shama, there she bare rishfe kashet. It says there he broke the fiery shafts of the bow. V'acharkach, in other words, there's some divine action taking place there, preventing the wicked who are shooting these fiery shafts. V'acharkach, and in the Psalm, Psalm 76, it says, Noda bihuda Elohim. This is actually, yes, I'm not sure if it's the exact same Psalm or if it's the next one, but the point is it follows it, and that means Elohim is known in Judah, recognized in Judah. The Omer, and another example, this would have to be Psalm 9, Noda Hashem, God is known, God is recognized, Mishpat Asa, he has performed judgment, he has judged. So just a lovely note, you might say, that Rashi is making here about a certain dynamic with regards to divine action. On with the verse, the Pharaoh, the V'chol Chelo, right? God says he will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army. Chelo could also be understood as power, right? But it's referring to army with power as related to army. Who hitchil? So it says Pharaoh first. This is what Rashi was looking at, that it starts with Pharaoh and then ends with his army. So it says, so the implication, the subtlety is, who hitchil ba'avera? He was the one who started the transgression in enslaving the Israelites, right?
He instigated the insurrection, yes.
Umimenu hitchila hapuranut, and from him hitchilu hapuranut, and from him began the punishment. Vayasu chen. This is the last two words of the pasuk of the verse. Lahagid. These two words are to inform us. Shivchan, their praise. It's in praise of them. Sheshamu lekol Moshe, that they paid attention to the voice of Moses. They listened to Moses in the sense of hearkening, right? And they didn't say, or they didn't think, hey ach nitkarev el rodfenu. How is it that we should draw close to those who are chasing after us? Anu tzrichim livroach. We actually need to flee. Ella amru, but they said, ein lanu ella divrei ben Amram, excuse me. What counts for us, right? What counts for us is only the words of the son of Amram, which is, of course, Moses. In other words, what he says is good enough for us. We don't need anything else. That's the point of this last little comment. We're satisfied. Even though they might well have said, wow, this is craziness. Why are we drawing close to the people who are chasing us? Let's go on. Verse 5. Vayugad lamelech Mitzrayim. It was told, this is a passive voice, it was told to the king of Egypt, Ki barach ha'am. So now, we've had God speaking to Moses, that little concluding statement, and now this is what's happening. Okay, so Pharaoh is told that the people had fled. Vayehafech levav paro, and the heart of Pharaoh, v'avadav, and his servants, Yehafech, was turned around, El Ha'am, towards the people. In other words, they changed their original attitude and now had a different, they were changing their minds. Va'ayomru, and they thought, Ma zot asinu, what have we done? Right? Buyer's remorse. Ki as shilachnu et Yisrael me'ovdeinu, that we have sent forth the Israelites from serving us. Let's find the place. Okay, here we go. It's actually up here. Vayugad lamelech Mitzrayim. It was told to the king of Egypt. So this is the background. It was told implies someone else told him. And it says ikturin, and this is the Yiddish of this. And ikturin in Jastrow, he translates it as officers in charge of slaves or state property. And it's not an initial Hebrew word. It's either Latin, and the Yiddish is agenten, agents. That's the Yiddish, agenten, agents. Shalach imahem, he sent along with them. So when the Israelites were sent out, he sent agents along with them. The kevan shehigiu l'shloshet yamim, and 3 days later, once they arrived at the third day, 3 days, shekavu lelech, that had been, remember they said we're going to leave for 3 days, that they had established they had set to leave, v'lashuv, and then to return. This has been stated. V'ra'u, and they saw she'enan chozrin leMitzrayim, and saw that they were not returning to Egypt. Ba'u, they came, v'higidu leFaro bayom harivi'i, they came back and told Pharaoh on the 4th day. And this is from the Mechilta. Uvachamishi, then on the 5th day, uvashishi, and on the 6th day, radfu acharehem, the Egyptians started to chase after them to get them back. The leil shvi'i, and the eve of the 7th day, the night of the 7th day, the eve of the 7th day, yardu layam, they went down to the sea. And this is in Sota. This is the first chapter of Sota. It mentions, B'Shacharit, in the morning, Amru Shira, they said the Shira, the song, V'hu Yom Shvi'i Shel Pesach. It's the 7th day of Pesach. And I know many people do not realize that Pesach has a holiday at the very beginning. The first day of Pesach is Yom Tov, and the 7th day of Pesach is Yom Tov, and the 7th day commemorates the crossing of the Red Sea. And that's why the Torah portion for that day is Shirat Hayam. It's interesting, right? It's sort of a lovely coincidence that we are going to do it. Of course, this is this week's Sedra, right? And it's also the 7th day of Pesach. Not today, but we do it. Lachein anu korin hashira b'yom hashvi'i. And so Rashi says, for this reason, we recite the song, that is the song of the Red Sea, on the 7th day of Pesach, to match that chronology. So, vayehafech. So this is sort of it's somewhat passive. In other words, it was turned around. It was turned upside down. Nehepach mipash haya. It got turned over from, this is how they felt about the departure of the Israelites, right? Because initially they chased them out. They tell them, get out of here, right? Well, it was overturned from what it had been, Shaharei, because Amar Lahem, he said to them, that is Pharaoh basically said back in Exodus 12, Kumu tsa'u mitochami, get up, get out from amidst my people, from among my people. V'ne'apach levav avadav, and the heart of his servants was also turned around. Shaharei, because l'sha'avar, originally, hayu omrim admatai, they had been saying, admatai, for how long, yeh zeh lanu lemokesh, will this be, these people, be a trap for us, a snare for us? And now it got turned around that they were chasing after them. Bishvil mamonam, for what reason? Because of the money, shehish ilum, that they had given them. So in a sense, I've always thought about the fact that the Israelites had received this money, but in a way it was paying them for their servitude. They had been working for nothing, and they were being compensated for their service. Me ovdenu, just it's a combination of words, and it's me avod otanu, from serving us. It's not from their work, okay, which would be me avodatenu. That's avodah is work. Avod is to serve. So from serving us. Going on. Ve'esor et richbo, he harnessed his chariot, ve'et amor lakach imo, and took his people with him.
Rabbi,
Yes.
what did I didn't follow the difference between, I've never been able to figure out the difference between service and slave.
Right. Okay. The difference is this. When you work for someone, you're not their slave because it's your work that they are owning. It's what you are doing for them that they are compensating you for. When you're someone's slave, they own your body. They own you. You're their property. So the work that you do simply goes along with it, and they don't compensate you for it. In the slave market, they purchased you lock, stock, and barrel. And when you work for someone, they don't own you. They own your service. They own your work that you do for them.
Yes, but how do you tell the difference between they're both ayin vet dalet?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. You're saying, how do you know the difference between in the Hebrew? Right. I understand. Good question. There's a different word. So in the Hebrew, I'm not sure that it's a biblical construct, but in Hebrew, say in Mishnah and Talmud, you'd say po'alim. The po'el is a worker and an eved is a slave.
But then, okay, so avadim hayinu,
Yes,
we were slaves,
correct.
but service of God is avodah.
Yes, yes. That is indeed the case, that we should understand that God owns us. We don't own our bodies. We didn't create ourselves. God created us. And so there's an attitude about our bodies that we don't, that how we treat our bodies is part of serving God.
And we're also tools of God's work. In other words, the people who are enslaved are tools of their masters, or being used that way. But and that's probably not moral, but as far as being tools of God's work, that really can't be anything but moral. or there shouldn't be any God.
Right, or you don't believe in God. It's
Yeah.
part of starting to understand what it is to believe in God and to recognize that there is a transcendent existence of which we are a particular derivative. But again, are we worshiping ourselves, or are we worshiping humans, or are we worshiping a divine creator? And when you start to understand this, the strength and power and moral implication of the mitzvot start to take shape. They come into light. And also to recognize the degree to which we have moved away from it. In other words, to recognize the limitations we have as human beings. And
Well,
to,
our society doesn't bring this up.
no, it doesn't. We don't learn this in school.
We don't learn it at home,
No, we
and
don't.
we don't learn it at Hebrew school.
No, we don't. Correct.
Well, there are some probably somewhere that do learn it at home and or Hebrew school.
I agree.
Yes,
You didn't, and I didn't.
And
I have
nor
a question.
in a direct.
I didn't learn it in that way because, as my father told me, you know, in many families, there are things you just don't discuss. No one says so, you just get it.
I have,
My dad, the rabbi, was 75 years old when I asked him if he believed in God. And he said, well, if you'd asked me 5 years ago when I was a pulpit rabbi, I would have asked you to define your terms. But now I'll just say I'm a humanist, and I believe in the part of the human spirit that creates and protects and loves and defends and sacrifices. And when I'm talking about God, teaching and leading services and praying with people, that's what I'm referring to.
Mhm.
And that's very powerful. It's given me something to talk with kids about besides their belief in science, as you know, the highest and greatest thing. But it doesn't talk about developing an awareness of walking with God.
So,
And
yes,
yeah.
go ahead. Finish. No,
No.
please. You weren't finished.
so I really appreciate what you said. And
Yeah.
yeah,
You can't walk with God if God is us. I mean, you're not walking with yourself, you're just walking.
Uh,
If God is a separate entity, a creator, or, you know, something that along the lines of what we've been discussing in our Torah study, that's something that you can serve, that you can be, you know, if you choose to. You don't have to choose to, you don't have to believe in God. You are what you are, you believe what you believe. But it's an option that's out there, and it is taught in some families and in some churches and synagogues and religious schools, but not very well in the American Jewish community. So it's kind of hard when you know, grow up completely secular. But if you are interested and think there's a benefit, you can certainly be on a path of trying to evolve your understanding and beliefs.
So I think that part of the problem I mean, I find this particular syllogism very helpful, right? And some of you have heard me say it before, and it is this is the thing that to me expresses beautifully the limitations of scientific thinking, which we worship, right? And that is, take all the things you know, and put them in an imaginary box. Now take all the things you don't know, and put them in a box, and ask yourself, which is the bigger box and by how much? All right? But it doesn't end there. Okay, there's a third stage, which is, what about all the things you don't know? You don't know. You don't even know you don't know them. How big is that box?
Not to mention the things you think you know, but you don't know.
Correct. We're not even talking about that, right? So how do we have the temerity to suggest that the only things that count are the things that we know, when there's this, and Heschel, by the way, brings us out one of the most, I would say the most helpful philosophy book I ever read was Heschel's, the book that basically is a beautiful, how can I put it, synthesis of Heschel's thinking, which is called Between God and Man. And in it, he talks about the ineffable. And the ineffable essentially refers to that category of things that we don't even know we don't know.
And if something in that category becomes known, if you add to the information that you know, sometimes it displaces something in the category of things that you thought you knew, and it turns out, well, I'm learning something different, and what I thought I knew is not so.
The world is still round. Yeah.
Look
Even though some people don't believe that, but the world is round.
Yeah, but that's
Or spherical.
there's some things that are maybe concrete, and some things that are maybe
conceptual.
demonstrably provable by science.
Right.
But the point, it goes with all kinds of intangible elements of knowledge, and not just whether they're mystical or spiritual or religious, but just anything kind of intangible can fit into that category of thinking that you know something, and then it gets displaced when you've learned something you didn't know and found out that what you thought you did know was off base.
Well, look at what we're doing right now. Look at the discoveries that we are making in the process of studying this material. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't know because we never even touched it, right? And then, of course, we could have a whole discussion about this, because look at the prejudices of people who are not open and stubbornly hold on to whatever beliefs they have. And again, I mean, you look at the political scene out there and the behavior of some people like QAnon, and you really wonder to yourself, how is it that they are so convinced of the rightness? How are they not questioning speculation, clearly stuff that they're speculating that is so ugly and unbelievable, and they're holding onto it? And look at the destruction of it. Look at the destruction that's taking place in using an excuse for losing by saying that the election was a fraud. It is such an old lie. It's the lamest of lies. And people buy it. It's because we really
It's easier than saying I was wrong or I was duped.
This brings up a lot of discussions, but it is after 8, so
It is.
end it with that, resolving it.
Stop. Okay, we are going to stop. Okay.
Good morning, Lauren.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I need to stop recording. So I want to bid farewell to those who are watching this as a recording, and thank you for doing that. And
Wish you all a great Tu B'Shavat.
yes, happy Tu B'Shvat.
Oh, yes.
Happy Tu
Go eat some fruit. Yay.
That's a mitzvah. And to be able to make a bracha. And if it's a fruit you have not eaten in over 30 days, you can say Shechianu. So I'm going to
Yay.
thank you.